Good. You always save me. Thank you, Denise. I appreciate it. I'm just back after 2 weeks of holiday where I tried my best to completely disengage.
I hear
And
you.
then I thought, oh, they throw this story at me. Oh, let's just
I
do
hear you.
where are we?
I keep trying to leave this topic also, it's just crazy.
It's just, oh man, I can't believe it. 10 minutes in and it's like, okay, can you just do a quick look at what's happening everywhere? So I'm kind of focusing on Ontario, but I think the last time we talked, I did this piece just before I went away talking about we need to sort of stop really focusing on cases and look
Mhm.
more at hospitalizations and other metrics as a measure of how well or not we're doing. But I mean, do we need? I mean, David Naylor tweeted, "Oh, a nasty fall is ahead based on the ICU admissions among kids in the U.S., but
Yeah,
also the rise in
that's
numbers in Ontario."
yeah.
Which is a bit of other people are saying, well, how many of those admissions are COVID and how many are RSV? But I'm kind of rambling here. But I mean, should we be concerned that we're now, it's other people have said, look, we have more cases now than we did this time last year. But is that even that a fair comparison? I mean,
It's
what's
a
your take on where we
really,
are?
really good question. And the situation is difficult to compare because the different variants are spreading now, right? So
Yeah.
it's not entirely unpredictable or unsurprising. It's not surprising. Sorry, let me rephrase that. It's not entirely surprising that we are hitting higher peaks right now than we were last year because of the hypertransmissibility. And I mean, Larry Brilliant, one of the leading epidemiologists in the history of the world, recently said that Delta variant might be the most infectious virus that we know of, which is a
Right.
staggering thing to say. And if that's the case, then it makes sense that the cases are out of control. Um, Now, whether or not we should care about that versus hospitalizations is an ongoing issue. And again, had we had this conversation a year ago, I would have said that's fairly accurate. But with the hypertransmissibility has also come a deeper reach into our most precious of demographics, that being our children.
Mm-hmm.
And previously, we could have said, the kids aren't really vulnerable. They do get it, but not nearly as much. If they get it, they're asymptomatic and they're much less likely to be hospitalized. That does not seem to be the case any longer, at least not to the same extent. So the rise in hospitalizations in pediatric hospitals in Florida and Texas is deeply concerning to me. And yeah, it might be largely RSV, but what if it isn't? And so
Yeah.
we got to watch that carefully. And the issue of long COVID, of course, hasn't gone away. The issue of multisystemic organ disease that some children seem to get from COVID infection is underexplored to a large extent. So we have to look at the cases, if for no other reason, that the rise and fall of the cases tells us the trajectory of the epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to look at this both from a systems perspective and from a pandemic management perspective. So from a systems perspective, we look at what are the threats to our institutions. So of course we care about hospitalization, we care about are the outbreaks in workplaces versus schools, we care about the distribution geographically, we care about the ICU usage. That gives us levers for planning. But when it comes to pandemic management, understanding the trajectory of the pandemic, we have to look at the cases because these other factors follow along after the cases. They may not follow to the same extent. It may not be as lockstep. It may not be the same fraction of cases that end up in hospital. It may be lesser. That is unclear. But it does follow the same trend line.
Yeah.
And now that we have acknowledgement at last that COVID is airborne, hallelujah, we know that masking is critical and ventilation is critical. Not just masking, but high quality masking, N95s. So it's this landscape has changed dramatically, to my mind. It's not the same disease; it's a different variant. But also, we have vaccination, so it's now an epidemic of the unvaccinated. So these hundreds of cases a day is almost entirely amongst the unvaccinated, and that tells us that from this point on, it's a choice what happens. A year ago, we were in the dark largely with no tools to control this thing except, stabbing in the dark around lockdowns and things like that. But now we have viable, effective tools, two in particular. We have the tool of vaccination and the tool of mask wearing. And the extent to which we use these tools to high effect are individual and political choices. That to me is a takeaway that we kind of shy away from on an hourly basis almost. And we can make all of this go away in a matter of weeks if we just choose to do so. And we dance around the which indicators to look at. That's not the issue here. The issue is, doesn't matter what indicator you look at, there is a problem, and we can make the problem go away.
And you said it's not entirely surprising that we see these kind of blips, these higher peaks. And you said that because who was it called Delta the most?
Larry Brilliant, great name, right? He's one of the guys who got rid of smallpox.
Okay, right. And so we see these numbers rising, even at I think today it was 325 in Ontario. And why might they be? What's happening here? Why do you think we've seen this sort of because it was down below 200 last week?
It's because we opened up too fast, and we did not stress the need to maintain mitigation strategies. Some people have returned to life as normal, and I understand why. You feel you've been doubly vaccinated. Why not, go back to normal? But they're interacting with unvaccinated people to an extent that is unhealthy, and in the context of Delta hypertransmissibility, this is what you get. So the same behavior last year would have resulted in a fraction of cases because of Delta. The behaviors are changed because of this feeling of invulnerability that vaccination gives us. And to a large extent that is justified, but only 70% of the population is doubly vaccinated. That is not a large number. It sounds like a large number. It's not. Because Delta, because of its hypertransmissibility and because it reduces vaccine effectiveness by a little bit, has raised the threshold for herd immunity considerably. So we got to get to 85, 90% of the population immunized before we can have the conversation of herd immunity. So we're nowhere near that. As a result, of course, it's going to tear through the eligible population, the susceptible population. These epidemics are all about susceptible populations, right? And who's susceptible? The unvaccinated. And while we have a large susceptible population, we're going to get waves. And there's actually a weird good news about this. Is the epidemic shape might be an inverted V curve. So my toddler is here. You want to say hello? Hello. I'm telling my girlfriend it's print media, so it's not recorded. It might be inverted V shape, which means that the cases will rise dramatically, but then they'll fall dramatically when there are no more bodies to infect. And this thing is so hypertransmissible that it may get to that stage, But we don't want to do that because, again, of the high rate of hospitalization and the fact that pediatric hospitals are overburdened and stuff. A lot of information I threw at you. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is we have a large susceptible population. That's a message I'm trying to get through. There is a sense that 70% is a high number. It is not a high number. It's a low number. And it means that 30% are susceptible, and that is a high number. And 30% of people infected at any given time means a fair proportion of that will be hospitalized, which means there will be stress in our healthcare system. And we cannot absorb that stress this time around because we have fewer healthcare workers. We have fewer nurses in particular. So we are not prepared for that.
Yeah. So where is this going to go then in the next couple of weeks, do you?
I'm an idiot, always an optimist, and I always feel we're going to make rational decisions when the time comes. And I think a vaccine passport is kind of needed now to cajole a certain segment of the vaccine resistant to getting that jab. It's working in Quebec, where hours after they announced their passport, the number of vaccine bookings doubled. So again, we have a way out of this. Vaccinate and wear indoor masks until the case numbers drop. And so if we pull out all the stops to encourage, not compel, but encourage vaccination, then we got a good shot at riding this out. I think we're in the second half of this epidemic locally, in this country, locally. We're not in the second half globally. So we have a chance of stifling this thing before the end of the year if we make the right choices.
Yeah. You say wear indoor masks. So what type of masks? Because I'm reading more about the N95.
Yeah, the N95s. Like the data is interesting. Some studies suggest that any kind of mask works on airborne transmission, and they do to some extent. But the N95s, because they're sealed around your face, they're the best for aerosol transmission because aerosols float around all the time. And the cloth masks were good when we thought it was droplet transmission. It just forces the droplets to fall closer to your face rather than 2 meters away. Distancing is less important now than mask wearing.
Okay. And where should we be wearing that?
Indoors. Anytime you're indoors with people whose status you don't know, with people you don't live with and stuff. Outdoor masking, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, it's all about ventilation, of getting aerosol particles away from you. So places with high ceilings and good HEPA filters are better than places without. Yeah. As the winter months come, the trick is we got to get this under control before it gets so cold we can't do outdoor things anymore.
Yeah. And are we, I mean, with the numbers we're seeing in Ontario, 325 today, 423 on Sunday, and so they seem to be kind of bouncing all over the place, but is there any hint that we're at the beginning of exponential growth here?
Yeah, well, I think we are in exponential growth. Based on what? Based on 3 data points, right? But that's how it looks to me. I don't know what to say. How high will it get? It depends on how people behave. These things are always driven by human behavior and policy decisions. If we had complete disease running amok, then it would skyrocket fast, then drop fast as the number of potential bodies goes away. But then that results in a lot of human suffering. So what I'm hoping happens is that people get a lid on this, it goes up to maybe 500, and then vaccination uptake increases considerably, and then we drive it down to nothing and let public health handle the rest.
Okay, that's your hope. All right. Thanks for this. I'm always so grateful for your time. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.